It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. This week, starring special guest star Mr. Ronan Chris Murphy. Yeah, baby. And thank you, fake band. Thank you, fake audience.
Woo!
Welcome.
Awesome. Great to be back here.
It's always good to have you. I told him I was going to call him Conan for the entire episode. Conan Chris Murphy. But no, it's Ronan with an R. Here, let's get the camera crew to move that over a pinch. There we go. Now we're both in the shot. And let's say hello to our lovely studio audience. There they are.
Hi, folks.
Vicky Flawith, Wendy Landers, Daryl Fletcher, Carl Wurzbach, Bob Gunnerfeld, Sherry Marcus, John Pearson, Jay
Gloria
Williams.
Covington, Rob Grace, Ann House,
Gloria. How
Jay
are you?
Williams.
Missed you at the road rally, Gloria. Dean Turner. I'm not taking off any points. It's not going on your permanent record or anything. But, normally Gloria kind of sits right behind me at the road rally, and I missed her this year. Anyway, Mojo Bone. Hello, Eric B. So, hello, all you guys. This week, we're going to do what hit producers are doing that you're probably not. And, we get this question. Oh, by the way, Ronan, I didn't even put your bio on here. Damn. Ronan is an engineer-producer that's been doing this for 30 years, something like that.
30, yeah.
Who are some of the acts that you've worked with?
King Crimson.
Anybody famous?
Gwar, Steve Morse, Terry Bozzio, kind of in other countries, Pete Teo, which is kind of a big deal, and Alexia in Greece.
Oh, thank you for bringing me the olives, by the way.
Oh, excellent.
He brought me back olives from Italy.
But yeah, I've been really lucky. Kind of been able to work with a lot of great people in all sorts of genres, from metal to pop to chamber music to jazz. Wow. And it's a fun way to make a living.
That's cool because most engineers do a thing, and they kind of lock into, I'm a metal guy or I'm a hip hop guy, and they don't get to ever do orchestral stuff.
Yeah, and that's like a cool thing if you can sort of make more money. Yeah. In a way, being the guy or the gal that does this, unless, of course, all of a sudden what you do becomes not cool. Right. Like when grunge hit, there was a lot of really successful producers doing kind of the hair metal stuff who were on top of the world, and they were practically on unemployment lines within a year. And but the big thing for me is I do have friends who are the guy or the gal that kind of does this, but when I'm hanging out, they don't seem to love going to work as much as I do. And for me, I kind of go stir crazy. Because if I'm doing, for me, I got really well known. I got to work with a lot of the kind of most biggest prog rock names in the world.
Right.
And which is great. But all of a sudden, that's the only calls I was getting. And I'm like, this doesn't work. Neil Young is the reason I'm a musician. Yeah. And so, really? I'm like, I have to go do some singer-songwriter stuff. And I do a ton of that. I'm like, I have to go do some jazz. And I'm lucky, too. I get to occasionally work on some of the big budget video game stuff. So worked Mafia 3, one of the Assassin's Creed games. I just did a game called Yoku's Island Express last year. Things like that. So I'm very intentionally,
Yoko Ono's doing video games?
Exactly. That's a game that would be fun. Yes.
Oh, man. It would be inappropriate for me to say what I want to say.
Yeah. But if I do too much of one thing for a while, the passion starts to dip a little bit, and that's really unfair to artists because, you should be working with somebody who's just stoked to be working on your record. Yeah. And so even if I gets to a situation where two people want me working on a project at the same time, and one's got more money than the other, if I've been doing too much of that thing, I'll take the lower budget thing just to keep things new and exciting. And to me, I think it's really important too, because if you've been working on pop tracks and bunch for a while, and then you do a metal record, you're going to be thinking about really important things about developing hooks and things like that.
And you might bring other influences into the pop record that they normally wouldn't do because they're largely imitating other pop records. Yeah. Certainly those are their influences, which gets us back to today's topic, which is what producers are doing that you're probably not. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing that much of this is going to be pop related. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what dominates the charts, certainly, and a lot of urban pop also dominates the charts. Is it like a top 10 list that you want to go down?
Well, there's a few different things, and I started came up with this idea a couple years ago, and I've been lucky enough to do your Taxi Road Rally for at least a decade or something now.
I get to see you at least twice a year.
Exactly. And so, but really my whole idea of kind of creating it was to be able to kind of look at what's happening on the top of the charts.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because a lot of times, the night before I do it, I'm like staying up late to find out exactly what is top of the charts like when I show up to start talking at the road rally.
Right.
So doing that. And I like being able to look at that. But one of the things when I do this thing at the rally, it's always good to say, hey, look, here's the new trend. Check that out. But for me, what I hope more people take away from it is not, hey, look what they're doing with hi-hats this year. I'm much more interested in people kind of taking away, hey, this is how you look at productions, like a scientist, and be able to pull them apart and look at it, because a lot of people listen to music and go, oh, that's a great song. And truth is, the great songs fool us and trick us, in a way that, they make us feel something that may not be accurate, like Black Sabbath is a great thing. You think Black Sabbath music and it's like giant, that's going to have giant guitar sounds and, those huge drums. And in reality, it's like, those are tiny, like cardboard drums and things like that. But one, just brilliant performances, but also in terms of where all of the instruments sort of have their space.
Right, you put it all together.
They give you that sense of bigness and loudness.
Yeah.
So a lot of that. But one of the things I try and get across from people when I do it at the rally is two things. One is to show how really within their reach a lot of very successful production techniques are. But also to get people to think and really look at it like a scientist, because people go, oh yeah, the vibe is that, and just make assumptions about what that is without really going to go, oh, this is what's going on with hi-hats right now.
How do they make those observations without becoming too influenced and imitative?
Well, there's twofold things. A lot of times, especially with a lot of your folks, being imitative there's a paycheck attached to that in terms of, oh yeah, we're looking for something to replace this track.
He's talking about film and TV stuff.
We couldn't afford this Eminem track, or we couldn't afford this Bob Dylan track.
Or we couldn't afford a pack of M&Ms.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's that kind of thing where people like go, oh yeah, Bob Dylan. Oh yeah, Bob Dylan has this vibe. It's like, well, actually, if they're if a music supervisor or, usually a director or producer has been living with this Bob Dylan track and the way it fits into the music when, she finally comes back to him and walks into the room, and that feeling, there's that space around the drums. There's that, that the piano's maybe a little wonky and out of tune, that the vocals like way out in front are totally buried. So I think a mistake a lot of people make is not just going, oh, Dylan feels like this. Well, Dylan feels like all sorts of stuff over the last 50 years.
Are people able, I hate to say let's take an average person, but I'm taking, like the median taxi member who they mostly have home studios. They range from I've got it kind of figured out to I've got it very figured out. There are obviously people on either side of that bell curve that are like super expert or super novice. But for the people in the middle of the bell curve that have it fairly well figured out. So they hear the Bob Dylan thing and they're analyzing it and they're going, oh, so it's got this space and it's got this kind of arrangement, and the acoustic guitar isn't silky and glistening and glossy like an Eagles acoustic guitar. It just sounds like somebody sitting across the room playing the guitar with it, which brings a certain amount of intimacy to it, which defines Bob Dylan in that regard anyway. So do they have the mastery of engineering and production skills to be able to understand it, number one, and then repeat it with their music?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. One is, I have to say that, I have no idea how long you've been inviting me back to the road rally. I love coming, but that bell...
Long enough that we're not tired of you yet. I'm thinking it's been like 10 years, probably?
At least 10 years, yeah. And in the last decade, where that bell curve is for taxi members, it's just insane how much it's moved.
We've heard that so much. People have gotten so much better on every level,
it's kind of crazy because, a lot of times when I started coming, which is 10 or 15 years ago or something, you'd hear these things and you want to help people, but it's like, wow, this is so far off the mark.
It's at square one.
I don't even know where to be inspiring and things like that. But again, better and better every year. But literally at the road rally this last year, I'm hanging out with these people playing me stuff like, oh yeah, what can I do to make it good? And I'm just like, you let me steal it and claim it as my own? And I mean, but really a lot of the conversations...
He's just kidding. He really is just kidding.
But a lot of the conversations I'm having with people at the rally are a lot more like I would just hang out with peers, like, you know, hanging out with some buddies, trading some ideas, like, hey man, I've been using this new reverb and it works this way, or wow, I just picked up this cool trick and man, it's really made my vocals pop. And so much of the Taxi kind of critiques has gone from, you know, the guy with the mastery down to the student to a much more kind of, hey, let's exchange some ideas. So that almost like, hey, I would feel it this way, or hey, maybe if you try this, you could really make that chorus pop. And, you know, and there are outliers too. There's still a few people like, all right, we got some work to do here. But it's amazing how much that bell curve has shifted.
Right before the rally this year, I got invited to Criteria Studios in Miami, where I got my first job and my entree to the industry. And they had a reunion. I haven't seen these people in 43 years. And I've always felt a little weird that I have such an emotional attachment to the place. Well, it was my first.
Where Bob Dylan did a record, by the way.
My first job. And the Eagles and Eric Clapton, and on and on and on. Anyway, I always wondered if I was alone in my emotional attachment to the place. And we all discovered, I was hanging out with Don Gaiman, who did, Jack and Diane with
Brian Adams.
No.
Or, John Cougar Mellencamp.
Yes. Just all kinds of stuff. Anyway, and Carl Richardson and Albie Galutin, who did the Bee Gees. Yeah. People worked on Eagles stuff. And we all have that same emotional attachment. But we realized that we had the thrill of going to work every day and having this kind of conversation about production, about engineering with other guys who were in the mix, whereas people today are isolated.
Yes.
And the road rally takes them out of that isolation
yes.
and puts them in a room with people like you and other fellow members who are more experienced. And what you're talking about is what happens as a result of that, and I love it.
But to actually answer your question, yes.
Why start now?
Exactly. You know, those people in the middle of the bell curve can absolutely do it.
Yeah.
I'm faster because this is what I do every day in and out. So I can hear something and pretty immediately go, oh, look at that. Or, oh, yeah, they use this kind of delay here or something like that. But when I started, it wasn't that. And for me, you know, I would spend times, usually just I'd be mixing a record or something and comparing it against records I love. And I'm like, I'm getting my ass kicked. I don't have any idea why. And but really, there was like a magical time for me. I remember I was working on this record up in Canada with this sort of, you know, alternative kind of rock band thing. And I'd been listening to Pearl Jam's Versus record, which Brendan O'Brien did a fantastic mix on. And I'm just like, man, I'm trying to do this thing and do this thing. And I must spend hours like listening to that, my thing. Why is it kicking my ass so bad? Like there's some excitement and quality.
What's the secret sauce?
Beyond, there's something, a drive and power in it that I'm not getting. And I'm just back and forth. And then all of a sudden it just hit me like that, wow, there's a whole bunch of 10K on top of that kick drum.
Yeah.
Because I was like everybody coming out, oh, kick drum is this low instrument, you know, and this is real early on in my career, so boom, 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 boom.
Wow, 10K on a kick drum, that's bold, because you're just inviting cymbal leakage, number one, but you're getting...
But it's super actually normal now, especially in the heavier genres. Yeah. Wow. But it was that thing where all of a sudden I realized there was this thing like a pencil hit, kind of hitting with tick, 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 tick. It's like, oh my God. Yeah, so all of a sudden I'm like, well, let me try that. And boom. It was that elusive thing, not to say that my mix was up there with Brendan O'Brien's by any stretch at that point in my career.
But that's how you become Brendan O'Brien, is by noticing what other people are doing that's cool and not copying them exactly, but amalgamizing, if that's even a word. Yeah. The amalgamation of, I learned this from Brendan O'Brien and this one from, you know, JJP.
And just going through that wrestling once. Now, when I sit down and kind of evaluate something, my ear, that's something I do. And I check, and I can understand the kick drum is this wider frequency. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a lot of times I can sort of peg pretty close to what your record was done by the sound of the kick drum in terms, you know, how much low end does it have? And I really listen, wow, does that low end kick drum have a ton of low end?
It's
or
funny.
Is it really sparse? And
I can't even do that anymore because so many... back in my day, everything was done with mics, wires, and EQ.
Yep.
And now it's layering of 5 kick drums.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know the libraries to know, that's this particular library.
But in a sense, I would never claim to go, there's a couple things you go, that's the same one everybody's using on that. But you can still tell, there's a lot of top end on that kick drum, or there's a lot of low end, or there's no low end on that kick drum. And that's all. Real estate's always being taken up by the bass, but doing that kind of work is so crazy important for your development as a producer, as an engineer, and really looking at things objectively. Because I was brought in to do this project, and I'm non-disclosure agreement, so I can't tell you the details about it. But they said, hey, we want this record to sound like a lost track. This project we're doing, they said, we're going to hire you to mix it, and we want it to sound like a lost track from this album from 1969. A great album. Okay. And great album that has mono drums. At the busy parts, it has 2 mono guitars. Okay. And, really sparse arrangements. And they sent me the tracks and I even told them in advance, the guy said, okay, here's a couple things for that vintage style you're looking for, what you need to pay attention to.
So were the tracks recorded back then, or
no? They were new. They were new.
You didn't record them.
I didn't. They just said, "Hey, we're going to send it to you to mix," and so it came back.
Did you mix the original project back in the day, or any of their stuff?
No, I was 2, but it came back and it had 13 stereo guitar tracks, and it's one of those things where like. And not to say, I can't see any reason for ever doing that, but not to say that 13 stereo guitar tracks is empirically wrong, but it's empirically inappropriate for the target.
Wrong, just saying. I'm not a fan of stereo guitars unless you're recording Antonio Carlos Jobim or somebody where the guitar is...
And there's nothing else to fight with it.
Exactly.
Yes. You and I are very much agreement on that. But it's one of those things, and that's the same sort of thing. Like you might have, working with an artist, whether it's for like a film and TV listing or even just an artist who kind of has aspirations like, I want to do something like in this trap style thing. It's like, okay, there are hi-hat patterns that are, really tied into that genre. There are kind of kick drum sounds and sort of the density of kick drum sounds that are really happening in terms of that genre and things like that. And of course, you can follow the muse wherever she leads you.
And you can dial them up with software. Honestly, you could probably go online today and Google so-and-so's kick drum sound and probably find out, which patch and which library.
Yeah, but
too easy.
But the biggest thing is to really sit down and like study productions, and same with writing. Like study what the masters have done. Yeah. And the great thing for me, the great thing about it is there are still a few records that I try and study, and they just completely humble me. I'm like, I'll never be that guy or that gal. But the amazing thing too is when you a lot of times pull it apart, going, I could get that guitar sound when I really listen to it. I could get that guitar sound, or, I could program that. And even just the song I was kind of, a song I'd love, Dan Wilson is such an amazing songwriter. He wrote this beautiful song called D&D, which I've loved for years. And I always just kind of listen to the fan and, wow, it's this beautiful writing. And, wow, it's kind of complex and interesting. And I was... I'm kind of learning. I wanted to just jam on it, and I went and learned it, and figured it, checked out, found the chords, and this is just four chords over and over and over again, except for the bridge bit. It's like, wow, that's not complicated at all. It's just great writing over. I could have come up with those 4 chords. So it's amazing how often a lot of times when you look at things, and that's even with some stuff going on right in the top of the charts right now, that is so within the reach of people in your bell curve, and even on the lower end of that.
We played some stuff on Taxi TV. Was it last week's show where we were playing? I can't remember. Anyway, it's recently. Oh, I know what it was. We had a staff-wide meeting here in my office the other night, and we were listening to stuff that the people at the Mentor Lunch picked. And some of that stuff was like right on the edge of being like record quality. And I'm not just talking about the engineering and production, but the whole package, the writing and everything. It's like, this is in the real world of making records, this is a B+ to an A-.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a lot to take an A- and make it an A or an A+. So I was very proud of our members.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, I want to turn you on to something. Where did it go? Damn. Try not to break it. I guess it was 2 months ago. I was online and I literally stumbled onto this thing, and the company sent me one. I'm not plugging this. I did get this unit for free, but I'm not plugging it for money. I'm plugging it because it's awesome. Packaged really well. It's a Mooer. They're well known for making a lot of pedals and a lot of Sims, and this thing basically combines everything they've got into one box.
Wow.
Feel this thing. I mean, it's built like a tank.
Oh yeah, this is serious hardware.
And it sounds so good. And people that are buying these things are saying that it's comparable to a Kemper, and it's $400.
Wow, cool.
So anyway, just saying again, once again, I don't get anything. I did get this unit for free, full disclosure, but it sounds amazing. And you know me, I won't plug anything that I don't really truly believe in. So far, I've spent probably, 3 hours just with my Strat plugged into this thing, just checking out all the sounds. Sounds amazing.
Nice.
And I'm a mic, wire, and amplifier guy. Mm-hmm. Not so much anymore. Sadly. Yeah, it really does sound that good. Anyway, back to stereo guitars.
Stereo guitars, and why you shouldn't use them.
Yep. So, what else did you talk about? What else did you talk about? I'm cough drop time. Getting a tickle in my throat. What else did you talk about in the class that I couldn't go to because I was busy in the ballroom?
You're busy running the whole thing.
I would love to see your class sometime. Yeah. There's so much stuff going on elsewhere in the hotel that you don't get to see.
Well, one of the things, there's a couple trends happening right now. And because of YouTube not wanting us to play anything, we can't really play you any stuff. But there's some things that are really happening right now in production. That's a really significant change. For about the last 20 years, things have just been dry and in your face. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things when I was kind of giving people feedback at Taxi, they'd play me their thing. I'm like, dude, what's with all the reverb? They'd just be drenched in reverb in ways that's completely stylistically inappropriate.
Right, but that's a sign of somebody that's just getting enough confidence in their engineering capability, and reverb just makes it sound prettier, so they go with a lot of it.
But the sad thing is it really makes it sound was making it sound super amateur or out of date and things like that. So really, reverb was one of those things, and in the 80s it was a member of the band.
Right.
But by the time the early 90s hit, it kind of became one of those things that was not cool to feature. So
definitely, frowned upon.
Yeah, so a lot of records were just bone dry for 20 years. Or when we use reverb, it'd be sort of tucked in a way. We're like, okay, I'm going to blend that in, use reverb to blend something or sit something back a little bit. But the really big thing, and this has really just happened in the last year, is reverb is coming back. So
give me some examples of types of... Well, give me a song example and then talk about how reverb is used now.
Well, number one song in the world right now, Circles by Post Malone.
Yep.
Which was also, I think, at the rally, however many weeks ago, was number 1 or number 3 in the top 3. So that's been sitting up there for a long time.
Right.
But that has a really long reverb tail. And there's something cool kind of going on with that, which I'll explain in some more detail in a minute, because it's really important to do it. But a big part of almost everything. And so, the things in the top 10 right now, Circles, Post Malone, number 1, Someone You Loved, Louis Capaldi, Good as Hell, Lizzo, Memories, Maroon 5, Roxanne by Arizona Zervas, Lose You to Love Me, Selena Gomez, Senorita, Shawn Mendes, and was it Camila Cabello, I think?
Right, Camila.
Yeah. And then Dan and Shay with Justin Bieber, and then Lizzo again. But almost the Roxanne track is a little on the drier side, but almost all of those have reverb as an important part, and really prominent reverb.
Not just used as an effect on a particular thing for a second or two to make a point.
It's pretty significant.
Okay.
But here's one of the things that I want people to and this is a great thing. There's a much longer discussion about the business model of streaming and all of that,
right,
which we won't get into. I hope they sort it all out, because as creators and people trying to learn more, streaming services are amazing.
Yeah.
Because you can go type in Billboard into your, at least Spotify. I pay for a bunch of them. But type in Billboard into Spotify and you'll get the top. And you can see what is the top of the Billboard right now. You can also check their list to see what is the top of streaming. And you can sit down and study. It's like having this amazing library at your fingertips.
There's no excuse
to study and look at that.
And it really upsets me when people say, I hate what's on radio. They mean what's out in the world.
Yeah.
I don't listen to it. Well, then, okay, so you don't want to really be in the music industry anymore.
Well, that's something, and luckily that's kind of going away too. In years past, we talked to people like, "Oh yeah, here's an EDM track we did for a listing. What do you think?"
Right.
And I'm thinking, I think you never listened to EDM.
That's true.
But again, it's that bell curve has shifted so much; it's crazy. But one of the things that's happening, and this is super important, I want everybody to go type Billboard into at least Spotify. I don't know if you can do it on Apple Music. I didn't try that. And listen to what's going on.
Yeah.
And one of the things you're going to notice is that reverb, prominent reverb being, and I mean that not being super loud, but being a feature component of what's going on is a huge part of what's going on right now. But the super important thing is, somebody might go, "Oh, well, I saw Ronan on Taxi TV, and he said, slosh the sauce on everything." But here's the super important thing about what's going on. In the 80s, they did make records like Slosh the Sauce on Everything. I mean, Cinderella's Long Cold Winter album is this amazing record that's just drowning in reverb.
Or any of the Phil Collins stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, dear God.
But
reverb was a member of the band.
But the thing that's happening right now, and this is super important if you're going to start kind of integrating these things into your workflow, drenched in reverb is not the thing that's going on right now. Contrast between reverb and very dry is the thing that's going on right now.
Okay, so give some examples, like specific instrument examples. Would it be that the band is basically dry, but a guitar part is drenched in reverb, so it sounds like it's in another room or 50 feet back?
An element is really dry, and an element is really wet.
Complementary elements, or not necessarily?
They kind of mix around. Most of the cases, drums are super dry right now. But a really cool example is this Post Malone tune. Where if you listen to it, you listen to that voice, I'm like, oh, that voice is drenched in reverb. Because you hear it, and you hear the long reverb tail. And so somebody just trying to get inspired by that and do that kind of technique might go, well, let me just pour reverb onto everything. Mm-hmm. But that's not what's going on with his. And it's really beautifully done how they've done it. His voice is actually pretty dry.
Yeah.
But there's a long delay on it. And that delay is drenched in reverb.
Right.
So we have that thing of the clarity and the presence that you often want from a pop vocal.
But it puts it in a place at the same time.
Yeah. But it's coming back. So you get the voice and then trailing off. So you still get that really dry thing. And on that record, the drums are really crunchy and dry. And so other things, you'll have a situation where things will be very dry, but there'll be a very kind of reverbed out string pad or guitar or things like that, or even like some of the Lizzo stuff. She's got a couple songs in the top 10 right now where her voice is very dry, in your face, aggressive drums, but she'll usually have an out of tune sort of piano in these two songs she's got on the charts right now that are very roomy. Mm-hmm. So the whole thing happening right now, where we had 2 decades of everything in your face, listen to anything with Rick Rubin's name on it as a producer from the last 20 years, everything in your face. But the thing now is stuff in your face, but also things out there. And almost every track you're going to hear, in the top 10, I'd say at least actually 80-90% of it has those kind of contrasts.
And do the reverbs fall in a couple of categories. I'm going to oversimplify, but I'm going to say that natural reverb, natural sounding reverb, and synthetic sounding reverb.
Yeah.
Even though the stuff on Phil Collins drums back in the 80s, you could make the argument that, the drums were in a room and the room sounds like that, but it was obviously synthetic.
Yeah.
I know they recorded the drums in I forget which studio.
Power Station, and it's actually super compressed room gated.
Right.
Is how they kind of created that unnatural reverb sound that's so powerful.
The stuff that I've heard on the charts lately, you're right, it almost all has a heavy pre-delay. Big fans of heavy pre-delay.
Yep.
And the reverb sounds pretty natural.
Yeah.
It sounds not chamber-like, but
but a lot longer than you would expect.
Yeah.
Especially after coming out of the last couple decades.
Right. Yeah. That's why when I say natural, it doesn't sound truncated, it doesn't sound harsh, it doesn't sound like an effect. It sounds like real reverb from somewhere.
And for you at home, a really big part of this too is that's going to be super, super urgent is if you want to have reverb where it feels like a feature on something, it can't have a lot of competition.
Right.
So you can't have, we got 9 guitar tracks and 3 synth pads and all of that. To get that cool effect, you have to have a lot of real estate available for that reverb.
So you're talking arrangement-wise.
Sparse, yeah.
Okay.
And, and virtually every track on the top 10 of the charts right now is really, really sparse.
What amazes me sometimes when I talk to friends of mine who've worked on big records like this, that they'll have a huge number of tracks, but yet they still sound sparse. But I find out that many of the tracks are just layered sounds.
Yeah, they'll like have layered up 20 kick drum sounds to get that kick run. I don't understand why, but they do it, and has had success with it. So God bless them. But but really, it is a lot of those giant track counts are using multiple tracks to create essentially one sound. So you'll have a background vocal stack that they might have 40 background vocals on to essentially create one instrument.
Right.
So
back in the old days, we used to put 4 people around a microphone
exactly,
and sing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a really big thing going on, and that's the thing that's changed so dramatically even from last year, and certainly from the year before, is the big hip thing is that contrast of super dry elements and super wet elements.
Bass sounds have been altered. Have changed a lot.
Yeah.
The really like sub-frequency growly stuff, it's just everywhere, to the point where I just got a new car a week or two ago, and I was tuning the stereo in the car, and I can't, because the bass is so predominant. Yeah. And it just you can't get it to sound right in the car. But then I realize I don't know what right is by today's standards. Yeah. That's the problem. It's not them, it's not the car, it's me.
Yeah, and it plays a really different role, because a lot of the urban stuff and pop stuff is these sort of 808 kind of synthy sounds,
really
and overdriven.
Really low. I mean, like, everything is below 100 hertz, to the point where it's like, oh my God, there are parts of my body that are getting rattled by this. I just want to hear the bass. I want to feel it thump me in the chest, not rattle other body parts. Yeah. But other people do.
And in almost all of those...
Clean it up, young lady. She's laughing. I met my hands, my back, getting a massage against the car seat.
And almost all of those, too, you need sort of kind of tighter kick drums, because with all that sub real estate, there's no room for a when the levee breaks kick drum sound in there. So it's like to leave real estate in there. Yeah. But also too, and that's the thing that you guys will find out. If you hang out with engineers who are talking about records that turned out great, we usually don't obsess that much about, it was this Neve EQ versus this Neve EQ, but it was that the production came in great, because and not just the urban stuff, but it's crossed over into a lot of just non kind of hip hop pop world and stuff. Is you'll have that gargantuan bass drum sound. Yeah. So here it is down here, and there's nothing up here. Until, when you think of arrangement, like those big things, like a lot of the trap stuff. Yeah. You've got this gargantuan sub stuff going on.
And not much else till you get to the vocal.
And the vocal, and then you've got hi-hats are really prominent. Yep. And, and just usually a kind of a backbeat 2 and 4 type snare thing. Yep. And so you don't have a bunch of like low guitars and stuff in there fighting for attention. So you can actually get away with pushing up that and making that bass bigger than we would do if we were mixing a rock record.
And the way the bass is played, it's sustained notes. They're very round, very long.
And it's usually synth-based.
Yeah.
Which, again, is another thing, and that's what's going like in the top of the charts. Like in the Spotify, the top 20 songs on Spotify right now, I think probably the only thing that has real drums on it is Mariah Carey's "All I Want for Christmas Is You."
Right, but that's an old record.
Yeah. So there's like one or two that are like eking up into the top 20 that have drums. They're old Christmas songs. Almost everything else is fake drums right now.
Yeah.
Which, as a guy who loves drums and is actually pretty good at recording, real drums makes me a little sad, but I also love ED.
Not Easy Drummer. What's the parent company? Tune Tracks. What's their more sophisticated drums? Not Easy Drummer.
Superior Drummer.
Superior Drummer just came out with a new modern drum sounding thing that Al Schmidt recorded in capital B. And I thought, well, that's odd.
Yeah.
It's supposed to sound like today's records, but it was done by Al Schmidt in capital B, which, I mean, he's one of the greatest engineers ever. Capital Studio B is a pretty traditional, it's a great sounding room, but pretty traditional. So I might have to go buy that just to hear it.
Yes. But a lot of it, too, is, it's not even intended to sound like a drummer playing.
Yeah.
And there's even one or two songs where I'm like, there's a chance that could maybe have been a real drummer that they just tightened up and chopped up a little bit. But that's really what's going on. The cool thing about that for, like folks out there in taxi world is, the top of the charts, there's so much going on at the top of the charts right now that there's nothing about being a bedroom producer that is prohibitive to you kicking ass.
And a lot of the stuff was probably started in a bedroom. Yeah. It may have gotten mixed on an SSL, ultimately, but the tracks probably got built in a bedroom.
But really, there is so much that really, and even part of this too, when I listen to it, I think it's a lot of really cool stuff in the top of the charts right now. But, as a veteran engineer who's pretty good at what I do, there's not a lot I listen to from a technical point of view going, wow, that engineer just knocked that out of the park. It's, man, that producer or that artist came up with really cool ideas. That was a cool sound choice.
What is a producer nowadays? The definition has shifted dramatically.
Yes.
A producer, is a songwriter, engineer, producer. It's kind of all in one thing versus, it used to be the producer told the engineer what he'd like to hear and or she. And the producer was in charge of the budget. And now it's like, who you bring in to work on the song makes you a producer, and how you layer drums makes you a producer, and does the hi-hat actually ramp up to 16th notes right before the chorus comes in. All that stuff makes you a producer versus the overall.
But in a way it's still back to like it was even when you started, where ultimately the producer credit goes to the guy or the gal who managed to get their name on as the producer. You have so many situations where, you were never in the studio ever, and somehow you got your name on the back as a producer.
I'm not going to disclose which band, but I actually engineered for a band that was famous. I will tell you that it was an urban act back in the days of disco, and the producers were a publicist and a photographer. That had a lot of drugs. And therefore they got the production credit. And those guys literally didn't show up for the first 2 weeks of the record. They were stuck in a hotel room with hookers and drugs. And the president of the label had to go get them and drag them to Florida and sit in the control room with them. And they didn't know anything about making a record. Mind blowing.
But there's a couple other kind of cool things going on, like in the speaking of drums, like if it's still in the case going up, like three of the top 10 songs on the charts right now have no drums at all. Well, actually, the Selena Gomez tune has just a kick drum sample that comes in on a slow quarter note thing, like the bridge and
I just
last
heard
chorus.
That song like 4 days ago. And
she's a really good singer.
She is really good, and her records are great. I love Selena Gomez records, but that one I kept waiting for something more to happen. And
nope,
it didn't.
That one. But this Louis Capaldi thing, it's pretty much piano voice with a little bit of washy stuff going on.
Great record, but another great example of maybe it's just because we've been trained to expect certain things to happen at certain times, so you kind of viscerally feel it coming, and then it doesn't. But then you listen to it, and go, still a great record.
But and also whatever
it's a new style.
The big Maroon 5 hit, Memories Right Now, had no drums at all on it. That Louis Capaldi thing is pretty interesting because this is my theory. I have nothing to back it up. Is that they pitch shifted the master on that record.
Really?
Because
why?
When I got turned on to him, I'm like, oh, this is great. I like this guy a lot. So I went and started YouTube, wanting to see some live performances, and everything I've heard is like a whole step down. Interesting. And he's got this deep, resonant kind of voice on there. And I mean, the single is great. But it's everything I found from him on YouTube was lower, and it sounded almost in a way where, a lot of times for tough songs or when singers get older, you drop things down a half step. Okay, your little next decade down another half step. But yeah, my theory is it's. I think he sounds fantastic in both versions. Yeah. But it's sort of just even the color of it is so different. I think they actually might have pitch shifted that whole master up. That's a theory, and I have no information to back that up.
There's a discussion about this. I had Shirelli on the show. Shirelli and Michael Lloyd were on the show 2-3 weeks ago. And we had a little bit of a discussion about how important the key is to how a song feels. Yeah. It can be so determined by the key. And apparently that discussion transferred onto the Taxi Forum, and people were having a discussion about it there. It absolutely, I mean, you could take a song from not being dark and make it dark. Yeah. Forget, making it a minor key, but just lowering it. Yeah. Texturally changes everything.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things too where, when people give me their finished records or whatever, like, hey, we'd love to see what you think, give you some feedback. Mostly I won't unless they hire me to do it. Right. Because in reality, at that point, they just want somebody who's made more records than they have to go. Great job. Because it's one of those things I always say, like, hey, we just put out an album. What do you think? You listen to the first song, yeah, that's in the wrong key for that singer. That's one.
Didn't we have one of those in the staff listening thing the other day where we all went, oh my gosh, or maybe I brought that up as everybody's leaving the room. I said there were so many of these that were really close that I really liked. You were here for that, right? But the vocal performances were the thing. It's like a finished record, but the vocal performance was good. Mm-hmm. It was better than adequate. It was pretty darn good, but pretty darn good does not make a hit record. Yep. You needed exceptional. And all I was sitting there like twisting in my chair thinking, man, if I had that singer if I were in the studio with that singer, I can think of 5 things I would have said or done with that singer to get the performance that would have taken it from being an incredible track with a solid vocal to an incredible track with a vocal that surpassed the quality.
And for us old fogies, that's what we think of as production.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Not like, oh, yeah, that's the guy who made the drum sample, which, again, is a valuable part of the whole process and something. But, yeah, it's one of those things when, from the older generation, that's the one where you said, yeah, let's look at tempo, let's look at key, let's look at getting the fire from that performance.
Vocal producers. Yeah. I have a friend named Cara Diaguardi that probably 30% of her work is vocal production. Yep. And she's famous for it because she's a great vocalist in her own right. But I don't know. Back in the day, we used to be required to be good at all of it, not just some of it.
But
let's talk about some of the other ones.
One of the other things going on right now is one kind of cool thing is guitars are back.
Really? Yeah. I mean, they're creeping back, but are they back?
Well, actually, I forget exactly what the lineup was. The weekend of the road rally. Yeah. But I think in the top 10 songs, at least 6 of them had guitars.
Wow. And hear that, Fender? Things are looking up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guitars, but the thing is, one thing that's really kind of hip, like the Post Malone songs definitely got guitars. The Maroon 5 definitely got guitars. The Shawn Mendes definitely has guitars. The Dan and Shay has guitars. I have to double check the others. But one of the things that's really happening with this, and almost in the weekend of the road rally, it was almost comic how much this was happening. But having a very modulated instrument, usually the guitar, and that's still in terms of what's going on right now. So a lot of what you're hearing isn't just, oh yeah, here's just the normal strummy acoustic guitar.
Modulation is no longer a dirty word.
It's really a core part of a lot of what's going on. So
does this mean I can break out the
chorus, and that chorus pedal can come out of the closet?
I was thinking a B3, a Leslie B3.
Oh yeah,
a B3 Leslie, because back in my day we used to run a lot of guitars through that.
Yeah, I actually just finished a record a little while back where we've got that on a B3, a Leslie on guitars and the vocals on stuff. But chorused out, flanged out kind of stuff. On the guitars.
The Mutron Biphaser. Have you ever used one?
Long time ago, yeah.
Okay. I had one in the 80s. Loved that thing. And now they're like $1,300 or something.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. I think I gave mine to a friend.
But even stuff like the Lizzo stuff, the keyboards are kind of out of tune. Like the piano, and the two things she's got on the top of the charts right now, it's built on piano that are kind of out of tune. So things being a little modulated, a little bit off, things like that is really a big part of it. So, if you can encapsulate, taking out the no drum ballad things, which we have 3 in the top 10 right now.
Which is amazing in and of itself.
Yeah.
Ballads are,
Yeah, and good ones too.
Yeah.
But the big thing, if you could say, encapsulate what's happening right now on the top of the charts, is you would have that thing of, you'd have very dry forward elements, like drums tend to be very crisp and discreet. Generally vocals kind of crisp and discreet, and other elements that are kind of very modulated and some reverb elements in there. So creating this kind of what we're used to of in-your-face, dry, crisp sort of things, blended in with things that are a little bit soupy, through different things.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the big overarching thing of what's going on like right now in terms of production. Bring me in next week, might have a different conversation. But actually the top 10 hasn't changed a lot since the road rally. So.
Well, that's only been, a month and a half or no?
But in popular music, that's like a lifetime.
Yeah. Hard to believe the rally just ended a month ago.
Yeah.
Wow. I find that vocal performances are very different nowadays.
Yes.
I mean, you don't get a lot of gymnastics out of vocalists.
Yeah.
And to some degree, you don't get a lot of emotion. It's almost more about the coolness of the vibe. Seems to be a thing now. Not, I mean, obviously for the ballad stuff, it's make me cry, break my heart, tear my heart out of my chest. But a lot of the mid-tempo pop stuff that I've heard, the vocals are very cool, but there's a word that almost a little detached sounding, but they pull it off so well that you go, okay, they had to really work at doing that. And within the context of the track, it all comes together. It's just a new sound. So all this goes to, you can't live in your yesterday and try and make records that are competitive today. So listen. Yeah. Listen up.
Yeah. And some of that, and I hope this doesn't come off as snotty or whatever, but but I think some of that actually ended up working. Detached thing is, you do have some people who come up to be sort of music stars who aren't music people.
Right. They weren't trained as a vocalist.
Yeah, but even in terms of coming up, you really using their voice as an expressive instrument in a musical context, whether that's singing in the choir at church, or singing in a punk band, or coming up, rapping with your friends or things like that, where you kind of develop the craft. There does tend to be some things where, that's an interesting character. Yeah, I guess he should be a rap star kind of thing. Or
Billie Eilish, great example of
she's the detached thing, great, but
and the technical.
And I'm definitely not talking about her. I think she's fantastic.
I do too. Yeah. I think that she has captured everybody's imagination with that detached coolness.
Yes.
but every word counts.
Yeah.
She gives her songs meaning. I remember listening to her the other day thinking, I don't think I've heard anybody give lyrics meaning as well as that since Frank Sinatra died. I mean, she's
she's legit. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm impressed.
All that stuff recorded in a bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to give her brother a lot of credit.
Yes, definitely.
That kid's talented.
Yes.
Nice. So what else? Talk about a couple more of these guys.
I'm trying to think.
Then at some point, where are we at? We're almost 5 o'clock. At some point, I want to open it up to questions.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit more about the resurgence of guitars, because I know a lot of people. I've seen this with Taxi members where production became so programming heavy and so keyboard heavy that people who play guitars, it's like, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
There's no room for me anymore. And I've noticed some guitars, but not to the extent that you feel that they're coming back. And I'm really glad to hear that, because, I mean, rock and roll was built with guitars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yay.
Yeah, and it's not always playing the same role that it would in traditional country song or rock and roll song. But, like
not strummy.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, that Post Malone tune is, that's Circles is, it's not too far off from being 70s kind of mid-tempo rock. I mean, 70s, they didn't have vocal auto-tune effect, super auto-tuned and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the vibe on that, that's not too far away from, like, what the Eagles might have done in terms of vibe and stuff like that.
Right.
When you've got that Maroon 5, you got it basically this kind of just very staccato, little thing. So they're playing roles in there, and even look at other stuff. But there are definitely like tunes in there where it is coming in, and it's a significant part of it, like in terms of what's the vibe of this track. And as a guitar player, of course, I applaud that.
Well, then you need to pick yourself up.
Exactly. And half of the top 10 songs in the country.
He needs a mower.
There you go.
I'm so in love with this thing. I can't wait to actually record it, but it just, the sounds that come out of it, it doesn't sound like a box at all.
Half of the songs on the top 10 in country have snaps on the backbeats on the 2 and 4.
I think that their snaps are becoming so ubiquitous for the last few years that it's
oddly enough, especially in country,
like claps.
Yeah.
Years ago, claps started coming in to the point where everything's got that.
Yeah, especially kind of urban stuff with kind of the 808 clap type thing in there.
Everything's got 808 claps, and I've noticed that in country, and the snaps don't sound that human. They sound like they're out of a box.
We were even listening on actually driving over here. I'm like, let's check out what's going on in the top 10 of the country charts right now. And there's even one that, there's, actually old school hand claps. Wow. The more I listen, like, with snaps in there. I forget which artist that was, but yeah, it's, a huge thing and that's been going on for a little while too. But paying attention to things like this, like, is so important, especially for your members who are, because I know you guys have that situation where like, hey, we need something in the style of check out this reference.
Right, and it doesn't mean rip the song off. It means understand all the things that make the reference work and sound like that.
And it's that one of the things like, wow, there are this, there's big snaps on the backbeats. Like, okay, well, that's certainly not ripping off anybody's intellectual property to throw snaps on the backbeats. But if you're trying to, do a replacement for a track where the producer of the film's in love with this country ballad, well, you might want to think about writing and arranging something that's got those.
Were you in the room when I interviewed Ken Calais on Saturday night? Or was it Friday night or Saturday night?
I wasn't. I mean, I got to hang out with Ken, who's brilliant.
He's such a good guy, and wow. Yeah. I sat in here getting ready, writing the questions, and I had rumors on, like turned up to 10 in here late one night. Just listening to it is literally putting a lump in my throat and bringing tears to my eyes, how well crafted. I've always loved that record, but I went to another level in understanding it. And I read his book, and he talks about the Naugahyde playing, I forget which song it was now, but they played drumsticks on a Naugahyde chair, and that's part of the sound. It brought me back to, I can't remember I think it was a band called the Lloyd Ellery Band in the 70s, and we put claps on it, but it sounded too easy. I mean, it just sounded like everybody else's record. So we ended up taking a 4x8 sheet of plywood and putting it up on cinder blocks on a wood floor. And we mic'd it from across the room, and then we put a 57 underneath it, and then put it through a DBX 160, and then put it through a gate and did pop, 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 pop with the claps. Sounded amazing. It was like a heart attack, in a good way.
Well, Judas Priest's song "Metal Gods" has this "Metal Gods," hunk, hunk.
What is it?
And they were recording, basically, Ringo Starr used to rent out his mansion in England. You could bring a remote truck up and record there. And they basically got a silver serving tray in his cutlery. So it's hunk, hunk.
Wow. Well, hello. Let's take some questions.
Yeah.
Let's see if there are any questions in. Have you been right? Okay, Bria's got some questions.
All right. Chris Waters asks, do you think it's better to have a producer who mixes and masters themselves, or do you think it's better to have a separate person mix and then another person master?
All right, the question boils down to, should the mixing engineer also master, or should you have different people?
I answer that as a guy who does both things. And I do end up mixing and mastering a lot of the records I do. In a perfect world, if budgets allowed it, I would love to send things off to a different mastering engineer to put some fresh perspective and things like that. I mean, in my own personal cases, I'm not a genius, but I'm pretty good at what I do. And it's one of those things where just kind of looking at the budget and things like that, I'm like, I'm actually a better mastering engineer than I think they're going to send it off to. So I'll
there are a lot of people that do mastering. And unless you know what a great mastering engineer is, you don't know if you're getting great mastering or not.
Yeah.
So, and the guys who are truly great at it are often unaffordable.
Yeah, and I'm also a little cautious. I mixed a record for somebody once, and I loved it. I think we all did a great job, and they sent it off to somebody who just destroyed the record. And the artist was mad at me for it. They're like, you made our vocals so harsh and edgy. I'm like, no, I did not. So if it's going to go off to one of the men or women who do this, then I'm like, oh yeah, I know their work. I trust them. They're great. For me, I love getting to send it off to a fresh set of ears and things like that. But I've had some bad experiences. So I'll usually keep it in-house unless I know that they're going to go off to somebody who I know does great work.
Yep, I completely concur. Next, please.
Vince Nicotina asks, how can you learn to hear frequency ranges in a mix so you know what to tweak to get the right sound?
Ooh, that's a great question. Vincent Nicotina wants to know, how do you know how to hear the right frequencies in a mix so that you can learn how to get the right sound?
The short answer, and then I'll expound on it, is develop a workflow that involves a lot of subtractive thinking.
Yeah.
Because really you can boost stuff and get it to be more exciting pretty easily. But to find problematic things and to learn to reduce that will develop your ear much more extensively. So really a big part of it is, I always love when I'm having problems to go and sort of do a search and destroy method of, boosting with a parametric EQ and finding, oh, wow, that
was going to be my answer.
That kind of sucks.
Because you can sit down and look at the numbers. Yeah. In theory, I mean, you and I could look at the numbers now because we're experienced and we know what the numbers sound like. But and you have a day, it will come to you almost like as an epiphany one day. You go, oh, now I get it. And then you start really perfecting how you tune your ears to it. But sweeping an EQ on every instrument is the greatest way to learn.
Yeah, and then once you kind of find that, and for me, since I do this all the time, like I'm one of those people that if you played me a note on the piano, I'd hunt for it on the guitar. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
But because, I've spent a lot more time doing this than this the last few years, I can kind of, I do a ton of mastering for people all over the world. I can pop up a mix and just hear and go, oh yeah, problem right around 700 hertz. And 100, because I do that all the time.
Do you use any of the mix comparison software that's out there?
I don't. And I don't want to dismiss those, but But I do reference other things a lot, and that's actually such a powerful way to learn, like whether you're mixing or doing your own DIY mastering, and if those comparison softwares help you do that efficiently, great. But one of the big things is how much, like if you're mastering your own thing and comparing it against some other, like your gold standards, spending the time, and because I do this all the time, I'm really fast at it, but I didn't come out of my mother that way. But you spend the time like going, what's going on in my mix that's not happening in that, or vice versa, and going back and forth. And most of the time, the problem is that thinking subtractively is a skill set you develop. Our natural tendency...
It's counterintuitive.
Yeah. Our natural tendency, because you put up your thing that you just mixed and compare it to a major label album that you love, almost certainly it's usually going to be...
you cry.
Yeah, but it'll be like, oh, wow, that's so much like, brighter, and the low end so much more powerful. So immediately you want to go and start boosting the high end. And what's usually going on is that your mix has too much of something. Yeah. And when you can really learn to go back and forth, what's going on?
Too much of a frequency or too much of an instrument?
I'm thinking like in the mastering stage where our mix is done.
Yeah.
But that kind of thing, like usually like a lot of kind of honky low mid range.
Yeah.
A lot of mixes naturally have too much of that, or too much sort of nasaliness in the vocal and guitar range.
And it's the most beautiful thing to understand and the most dangerous to learn how to do, because you're 100% right. I was telling you, I was tuning my car stereo the other day, and it's got a parametric EQ, and I think it went 100, 200, 500, 1K, 2.5. Fairly standard. But man, oh man, the 200 and 500 on that car, and it's amazing. If I took 500 hertz down like 2 dB, I don't think I hear anything. But if I brought it up to, I really heard it. Mm-hmm. So I brought it down to, and then brought it down like another 32nd of an inch and left it alone. Yeah. Because if you take too much of 500 or 750 or 1,000, let's stick 500 and 750, even 200. It almost always sounds better taking it out, but you very quickly get to a point where you've lost the balls.
Yes, exactly. But it's that thing when you find where there's too much buildup in your thing you're working on, and you start pulling that out, all of a sudden your high end feels more exciting. Your low end feels more powerful because you've gotten rid of that excessive buildup in the middle. That's usually where it is. I mean, sometimes it's on the low end, sometimes it's on the high end. But it really is amazing. And again, if AB software helps you do it, go for it.
I've never tried any, but I've heard two people I trust, whose judgment I trust, tell me that they use it. They're both taxi members, and they both do it to make their cues sound like records.
Yeah.
And
the only reason I don't use it is that I've got a workflow that allows me to do essentially exactly what they're doing.
Well, you've also got like 20-some or 30 years of experience.
But I'm still
These are guys that just really learned how to be good engineers 3 to 5 years ago.
Yeah, but a lot of this, you should never worry about that, because some days I walk into the studio, I'm like, I'm really good at this. And I sit down and I'm confident, I'm doing great work. And there's other days I walk into the studio and I'm like, man, somebody's going to catch on that I'm a complete fraud and have no idea what I'm doing.
Everybody goes through
that. And you're thinking, I have no idea what to do with this. And I'll go and like listen to records I know and love just to kind of reorient me and go, okay, this is where you are. This is the direction. And, because one of the things is, that self-doubt can kind of throw you way out of whack. And then going back and go, okay, this is where I am related to these mixes that I know and love really well. Okay, good. Yeah, I know. But I do it. I still, with thousands of credits under my belt, I still, when I walk in the studio, also even a lot of times, because I do such like incredibly diverse stuff. Like in the last couple of weeks, I've worked on projects from Japan, Peru, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Italy, and the United States, and things like that. So even in that kind of thing where I was mixing something, asking the producer like, so what's hot in the Democratic Republic of Congo right now? Again, why we love streaming services.
Warlords.
Yeah. But it's
Warlords. I love that band.
Yeah, but it's that thing where we might think, oh, Democratic Republic of Congo, that's African, that's going to be all about like these natural drums and all of that. that's actually not what's hot. And, Democratic Republic of Congo is very much more synthetic kind of feeling percussion and stuff right now. So for me mixing something, I kind of want to know, okay, what's hot? How are they feeling, these intentionally artificial drums against the more organic elements and things like that. So
yeah,
really listening to other stuff as a student.
It's a must.
You
can't be a race car driver if you don't start out with go-karts and watch what other drivers are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all, almost all of us who are lucky to do this day in and day out are still doing it. We're all still students because we got to keep our things, but also we got to know what's going on in terms of trends and informing our own creative work.
It's so fun and fascinating. I don't even do it. I haven't done it in a very long time. And just literally before you got it, I threw it in the recycling bin. But I was reading, Sound on Sound magazine cover to cover because I love this stuff.
Yeah.
All right, another question, please.
Smudgy asks.
Hi, Smudge.
Smudgy.
If we were to start a track and wanted to try to learn by recreating a Maroon 5 song, what instrument would you start with, and what effects would you put on it, and what instrument would be second?
Okay, so just in case you couldn't hear Bria clearly, because she's on the backside of the microphone, if you were going to do a Maroon 5 sounding track, which instrument would you start with? What would you put on it to get in the authenticity ballpark of them?
Well, the tough part of that is Maroon 5 songs are so different across, their career. So one of the things in terms of developing the craft or being inspired by, pick something to start with.
Which era? Which album?
Yeah, which album, which era? Again, the one that they've got in the top 10 right now essentially has this sort of like electric piano. It's pretty much like voice, electric piano, and guitar. And except for like a little bit of washy synth stuff, there's not really anything else on it. So in that, I would definitely start with the electric piano. But I generally, unless you're just kind of having a fun EDM approach where you go rhythm section up, which would be appropriate for some of their stuff too. I always generally for writing, I like people to. I think it's a good idea to start with the your chordal instruments, whether it's piano, guitar, harpsichord, whatever your thing is, just because there's so much cool stuff that can come, and just in terms of how you feel chord changes and things like that.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing kind of, because Maroon 5 is like, they kind of were a rock band earlier on, then they were kind of a boy band, just like Take That or something like that, and now it seems like just Adam's solo career with a different name, but there's different eras of that. But in terms of you just songwriting, I think it's a good idea to start with your chordal instruments or start with your melody, depending on how you approach it. Just because there are kind of things about changes where you might feel like, oh yeah, we're really going to push into the next bar, or a little and one kind of change into it. And I see a lot of people will start with a drum pattern, and then they're kind of locked into it. And you can almost sometimes feel that, oh man, that change really wanted to feel different. Those subdivisions really wanted to feel different, but they decided that this drum loop was going to be God, and did that. So depends on the era, because some of their earlier stuff is very guitar based and things like that. But I would say start with the chordal instrument, and take a listen to Memories. That's very much just driven by a particular kind of piano groove.
Weren't they
going on?
Tabitha's Secret back in the day?
Yes. Or one other rig. I actually have.
No, that was Matchbox 20.
Yes, maybe. Yes. But they probably had some other name. But I don't feel like I gave Smudge a great answer. But
well, it depends on the song.
Yeah,
you can't really. It's such a broad question.
It's Kara's Flowers.
There we go. Yes, Kara's Flowers.
Okay.
We might even have that record in our CD collection.
Oh.
Next, please.
Yeah.
Cass McEnty asks, while mixing, how long does it usually take for a song to wake up and feel like it's working?
Cass McKenty wants to know, while mixing, how long does it take for a song to wake up, Bria did this, air quotes, and feel like it's working? But there is that point where you go, okay, I don't suck and this is coming together, so.
Well, there's two ways to do it. Like the thing I'm back working on tomorrow is actually kind of a remix of an archival thing where I'm working from an 8-track.
Okay.
And it'll literally take me 10 to 15 minutes to have that sounding good.
Yeah.
It's not to say that I won't obsess about it for another 6 hours on that. But then you have these other things where literally you spend a couple hours just doing file management on it. But on your sort of good general thing, once you kind of organize your tracks and things like that, usually the life of something is usually there within 30 minutes for me. Again, that doesn't mean that I won't take the rest of the day to take it to be just a real thing of beauty, or really eke out or highlight the most exciting and personal, important stuff about it.
Have you ever had the experience? Actually, while I was sitting on stage with Ken Colley at the Road Rally, I noticed this about one of the songs. Can't remember which, but I remember years ago, probably around 1980, somebody gave me a 1-to-1 multi-track safety of the song Celebrate or Celebration, whichever, by Kool and the Gang.
Good.
And I knew the engineer. It was done at House of Something in West Orange, New Jersey. A very well-respected studio, very well-respected engineer, and I put the tape up and I started bringing the faders up one by one, and it's like the snare drum sounded like tin foil on a tissue box. Track by track sounded like crap, and then at some point I just dumped all the faders and just brought them all up to zero. Everything's still in mono, and I went, wow, that sounds almost like the record. And I remember Ken was bringing soloing tracks and on stage at the rally from Rumors, and there was one song where I thought, that snare doesn't sound that good in context of the room, and there wasn't much bleed on that record because in the end they re-overdubbed almost everything. So I find that a lot of times you're probably wise to set up the mix as a rough with everything. Just bring all your faders up to zero and listen to the whole.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then think about it and go, okay, so what needs to be improved or fixed? Don't try and make a perfect snare. Don't try and make a perfect kick. Don't try and make a perfect bass. Don't try and make a perfect anything, because they'll be perfect on their own, but you put it in context and you've got too much perfect.
Yeah, I just finished reading producer Daniel Lenoir's book, Soul Mining. And in the last chapters, he talks about, the last chapter is called 4 Days with Willie Nelson. He's talking about doing the Teatro album. And they did that record in 4 days, and apparently, from what he said in his book, no reason to doubt it, they would basically everybody played together. And then when they'd kind of come back, listen, pick on the take, they would mix it real quick. And then they'd do the next song. And what's on the album is those mixes that they did between takes.
I would prefer to work like that.
Yeah.
I love that.
But you should, and there's not exactly the question that was asked, but people really should work when they've got their producer hat on, making choices about what synth pads they're going to use, how many layers of guitars are going to be there, how busy the percussion is. Your record should sound good just pushing up the faders and panning a little bit. You should have a really good sounding record. And if you don't, you're probably not ready to mix. Again, sometimes we don't have that luxury to we just have to make it work.
Right.
But really, so it's amazing how many, when I get things to mix from really talented producers, I'm pushing up faders and going, should I really charge them this much to mix? Because I'm not doing any work.
I had the converse happen where a lot of times I really didn't like mixing other people's recordings. And I took it as a major point of flattery when I would get a phone call from somebody that was mixing a record that I engineered. They go, dude, thank you for doing all the cleanup work. Everything's great. I shoved the faders up to zero. Sounds like a record already. But when I got other people's stuff, I couldn't hear their vision. And I didn't want to take it out of that realm because they were in the room with the artist that created it. So I didn't want my mix to take them out of the bag that they were in already.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just felt inappropriate, like I shouldn't be on this project. There were a couple times I actually turned down a project after getting the tapes and going, I'm not the right guy for this.
Oh, wow. Uh-huh.
Yeah. By the way, I did go through that same thing you did. After working with Neil Young, I was branded the acoustic guitar guy. Mm-hmm. And I could not get any rock guys. That record I played you that song on before, that was like my comeback. I decided to do that to show people I could actually record an electric guitar because I'd done so much. Oh, I've been to Hollywood.
Yeah.
All right, next, please.
And Redwood.
Marion Laird asks, what are some good wet/dry reverb ratios for mixes? And does that change from genre to genre?
What are some good wet-dry ratios for mixes, and does that change from genre to genre?
Yes, and even in the same genre from year to year.
And song to song.
But I would strongly discourage you from thinking about a number on that. Because the numbers don't tell you anything.
No, you got to use your own judgment, your gut.
Yeah, so that's going to change every time. And a big thing, too, even more where I'm not worrying about numbers is most of the time, if I'm just putting a little bit of reverb on a guitar or tambourine to sit it into the room a little bit, I might just put it right on the individual track, like mixing in the DAW.
Yeah.
But most of the time, for primary things like would be a drum reverb or my lead vocal reverb or things like that, I'm bussing those out to a new channel, putting the reverb there.
And using sends to...
Yeah. And so I'm essentially blending. So I have no idea. I'm not going to do the logarithmic math to tell me what is 13% related to minus 70.
If you're pulling this out, or no, it's not a slide rule, but if you're pulling out the slide rule to make your record, you're probably not making a great record.
So really, it changes. One thing I can throw in that's super, super, super important is reverbs rarely come out of, the sound coming out of your reverb is rarely ideal for sitting into your mix. I EQ reverbs on virtually every record I make.
Wow. I'm saying wow because I grew up with a bunch of guys that did that. I mean, they would EQ the sends, they would EQ the returns,
Yep.
They would compress the returns, they would do all this stuff, and then I can't remember if it was Shirelli or somebody, one of my it's like, man, I just use presets, and on occasion I'll change them. And it's like, wow, really? But the one thing that all of my engineer friends from every era agree on is the days of having 7 or 8 different reverbs on the same song are largely gone. That most people find that's 2 or 3. Is that true for you?
I would say for main ones, and truth is now that I'm doing more kind of things. I mean, I have a ton of outboard gear and use that, but with a lot of in-the-box stuff and complex routing and things like that, I might have a few others doing like tiny little jobs, but I'll usually have, there's rarely more than 1 or 2 main workhorse reverbs in a mix.
What's your favorite reverb sound? Plate, chamber, room? Do you have a default that you kind of start with and then see?
No, and to me also personally is, when you're in the digital realm, for the most part, I've never really pulled up a chamber on a Lexicon reverb and thought, oh, that really sounds like a chamber. It sounds like a Lexicon reverb, that kind of patch. And so I've never really been too obsessed about that.
Yeah.
But what I can give one plug, one of my most common reverbs that I use is from a company called Valhalla. And they have Valhalla Plate.
Yeah.
It's $50. And it is probably my most used in the box reverb. I mean, I've got outboard reverbs too.
Yeah.
But that one, and actually Mick Gazowski.
Idea.
Mick Gazowski, he engineered, mixed the Daft Punk record.
Okay.
But also, he was the big vocal guy. So he was mixing your Mariah Carey, your Celine Dion.
Gosh, I can't believe I've never heard his name.
Yeah,
I love
Mick Gazowski. Yeah, he's incredible.
Love Daft
And he turned me on to that. And this is a guy who can get whatever reverb he wants.
Valhalla?
Valhalla Plate.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a plate reverb, and that's my most, and which I actually shared on my Instagram account, Ronan Chris Murphy. There you go.
But you know what? Because I will forget,
yeah.
we've only got 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
Plug some of your stuff. People should know how to find you. So what's your site?
So Instagram is RonanChrisMurphy.com. I mean, whatever, just Ronan Chris Murphy. If you go to RonanChrisMurphy.com, that can feed you out to my educational stuff.
Tell them about the boot camp. And
one of the things is I do kind of alternative education things. And all my, like most of my educational stuff I do is bodies together in a room. That issue we talked about at the beginning.
Right.
Everybody's so like alone all the time. I try and create events that get people together. So even a lot of things are like, hey, will you live stream? I'm like, no, that's not the point. The point is a bunch of bodies. So my recording boot camp, recordingbootcamp.com.
Right. Which is, you own the trademark for that, right?
I do. Absolutely do. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something later. Anyway, but the big, so I usually do one, like a 6-day intensive, usually one these days, about one in California every year and one in Europe, which is usually in North Italy every year.
And he brings me back a jar of olives from Italy.
Yeah, that's why you're excited about the recording boot camp stuff. Yeah.
No, seriously, the olives were so good.
Awesome.
They're not vinegary and salty like American olives. They taste like olivey tasting, floating in really good olive oil. It's like every olive is delightful.
Nice.
Anyway, yeah.
But some things, taxi folks, especially if you're on the East Coast, in May I'm doing 2 retreats in West Virginia at this beautiful old resort, just like 90 minutes from Washington Dulles Airport.
Wow.
And 2 hours from downtown DC. But we're doing the Mountain Songwriting Retreat, which I put on with Dave Nachmanoff, who great singer-songwriter who I met at the Taxi Road Rally.
Okay,
years ago. But he's been touring and collaborating with Al Stewart for a lot of years. So that's a lot of people know him. And also Michelle Schacht is one of my main instructors for it this year. So that's like a 4-day retreat, all inclusive. Out in the mountains, hanging out, writing, co-writing, collaborating, and workshops.
Where can they learn about that? From RonanMurphy.com?
So if you go to
RonanChrisMurphy.com.
Yeah, RonanChrisMurphy.com. I got to make sure I've updated that one in a while. But MountainRecordingRetreat.com.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Mountain Songwriting Retreat.
She put it.
Okay, good. Yeah, and the next one we do, we're doing the Mountain Recording Retreat, which is recordingretreat.com.
Same place?
Same place. And again, 5 days, great food out in the mountains, lots of workshops. And it's a really great thing because it's it'll never be what the rally is, but it has that thing where we like 80 to 90% of the people who come again every year. It's turned out to be this really cool thing, and it's way, 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 way smaller scale. But
I always recommend that people go to the Hawaii Songwriters thing because it's got the vibe of the rally and it's small.
Yeah.
I'm not above recommending other conferences.
But and for taxi folks, I talked Fett into coming out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so Fett's going to come out and teach some workshops and stuff for me.
Wow, the two of you guys on the same stage.
And
every year I think about this. I would love to get you, Fett, and Shirelli.
Oh yeah,
just doing nothing but Q&A with the audience.
And that'd be awesome because we'll disagree on a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And
I think those both guys are great too. Yeah, but it's fun because we'll disagree on a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are cool things. And also, if you guys want to hit me up, check those out, write to me. For taxi folks, I can do discounts and stuff like that. So if you see any of those, the recordingretreat.com or mountainsongwritingretreat.com.
What's the thing that you do out by your house?
We also do, we do a lot of stuff, but we do something called the PMC Songwriting Festival, which is pmcsongfest.com. And that's like a weekend kind of celebration of songwriting where it's kind of workshops and things like that during the day, big concert at night, and that's a really cool thing. It's a much bigger scale, but it's great. We had Michelle Schacht for that one too, but also Shelley Piken. Wrote tons of great stuff. She came out.
She's a bitch.
And a liar.
She wrote the song Bitch.
For Meredith Brooks, yes. She's a wonderful woman, but apparently, according to her, she's a bitch, she's a liar, she's something or another. And that's a really cool thing. And but yeah, check that one out. That's going to be in September. And we do that like every penny we raise from that goes to charity. We kind of do it to support kind of seniors, basically senior services and support up in a rural area up north of LA.
It's called the Spawn Ranch, right?
What? No, exactly.
That's what Charles Manson lives.
Pine Mountain Club is the name of the town.
I think Liz actually sent me an email It was one of those things where I saw, like the little preview thing, and I went, oh, yeah, I got to get back to her, and then saved it, and never did get back to her. I ran into her at the rally. Crap, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
anyway.
but Pine Mountain Club's this amazing place. I live there. It's north of LA now. But I can be in like Burbank in about 75 minutes, but 2 times in the last 2 weeks, we've had more than a foot of snow. And we have bears and bobcats. It's a whole nother world. But the killer thing is this beautiful kind of small mountain town. And I thought, okay, I'm going into this little small mountain town. I'll be like the big deal producer guy. Not even close. I've got, buddy of mine up there, produced for little artists like David Bowie and, Faith Hill, like covered his songs and stuff. And another buddy of mine up there did a little record called Surrealistic Pillow for the Jefferson Airplane and Feliz Navidad for Jose Feliciano and things like that.
Yeah, I remember
Rick Gerard did that. Yeah. And so he lives up there. And so it's turned out to be, we've got playwrights up there and songwriters and musicians. It's turned out, it's this kind of amazing, not hidden anymore because I've talked about it on Taxi TV, but it's this amazing kind of small, beautiful community up in the mountains with just tons of like killer creative energy.
Does it have like a Big Bear vibe, or is it different?
Smaller, yeah.
Even smaller,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, way smaller and chill than Big Bear.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Big Bear is fairly small and fairly chill.
Yeah, and it's a really cool thing. So when we do these things, like most of the talent I'm pulling in, to do workshops and stuff, tons of that's coming from just locals. Another buddy of mine who will come in and do stuff. Has written, wrote the theme song for Sister Sister and did a bunch. Disney wrote stuff for High School Musical and things like that. And
who's that?
Kevin Quinn?
Yeah. Kevin was a Taxi member, I believe, and I met him at the Hawaii Songwriters thing.
Kevin's amazing.
Brilliant guy, and a great golfer.
Yes.
He's like a world-class golfer.
Yeah,
he would rather golf than do anything. That is probably correct. Even more than music, I think.
Yes, that is correct. I had dinner with him last night. But,
oh, really?
But his amazing thing about him is like he's known for this Disney stuff and High School Musical stuff, which is in a perfect way, sort of just very pop and, light and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But his singer-songwriter stuff is
much
just,
deeper.
Oh, good Lord. Because I actually had him come
He sent me some of that stuff years ago.
Yeah, I had him come and perform, and I thought, it'd be cool to have him, the guy who did the Disney stuff, and he went at the big concert at the festival, and he just busted out some of his singer-songwriter stuff.
Give him a hug for me when you see him.
Yeah,
will you?
And he was one of the big highlights of the whole festival of it. So yes,
wow.
But yeah, fun place.
Oh my goodness, we have 1 minute left. 2 minutes.
Oh,
what does that say?
4 minutes. If it's 5:30, we're.
Okay, let's do another question.
Okay, Funky Freddy asks, isn't there a danger in conforming so much to trendy production techniques?
Isn't there a danger? Funky Freddy wants to know, isn't there a danger to conforming so much to kind of modern, current production stuff? Is it derivative? Does it all sound the same?
It's a great question. It really depends on the application. So, a lot of the really, my buddies who are great producers have done lots of iconic stuff. They're like, I don't care what's going on right now. I'm really interested in what's going on next year because that's when our record's going to come out. But
right,
but in the reality is, one is there are situations, especially in the world of taxi, where you have listing opportunities and things like that.
Right. We don't only do film and TV.
Yeah.
But for the film and TV stuff, they need stuff very quickly, and they want it to sound like today versus what it would sound like a year and a half from now.
Yeah. But part of it too is kind of knowing what's going on, and I always say it's good to know the rules to break them. But a lot of it too is where I will harp on people a little bit is they'll try and do something where what they're going for is so outside the norm, and the weird thing about it is I do work. I'm a producer, I'm interested in getting my stuff on the Billboard charts and things like that. But also a lot of what I listen to in my downtime is just crazy avant-garde stuff that, music that wrecks parties and things like that. And, I love all of it. It's funny, Spotify's here's what you've been listening to. And, I had just crazy avant-garde EDM and Britney Spears and Icelandic folk music and Dixie Chicks and all of that stuff on there.
Yeah.
But it's really kind of good to know. And also really studying what's going on even just gives you ideas, because when you really study what's going on with hi-hats in this kind of music and why does it give it that vibe, it's like, well, you've just built up your own toolkit when you want to sort of sculpt and vibe something in a direction.
That's the key to everything.
Yeah.
Is having all those arrows in your quiver, because you may not use one of those arrows for 5 years, and one day a song walks in your door and you're sitting there going, I remember hearing a hi-hat sound that I loved, and it was this type of song, and that's the day you pull that arrow out and stick it
and
in
even
the
like
bone
again, like with trap music, what's going on with hi-hats and trap music, which a lot of people were asking me about at the rally, which is why I maybe mentioned it a bunch. You know, the particular kinds of hi-hat patterns are such a huge part of it. It's really good to know what's going on. And that could be like, oh, that's why I hate that music, which is just as valid as much as why I love that. Oh, that's why it feels kind of stilted or something. Like, oh, I really want to make sure I do that. Or if I'm working with a collaborator.
Every time I think they've run out of ways to, like, sweep a filter on a hi-hat or sweep a filter and pan it. All the different combinations of things that they do to hi-hats and trap. Then I hear something and go, well, there's a guy who came up with yet another great idea. Whether I like it personally or not, I'm still impressed that they came up with the idea. All right. We're at 5:30. One more quickie.
All right.
Compression before or after EQ?
Excellent.
Compression before or after EQ?
Try them both. My general approach, which I will break the rule, is generally I will, if I'm doing EQ cuts, I'll do those before compression, because I don't want a bunch of low end. If I'm not going to keep a bunch of low end in a track, I don't want it really affecting my compressor. And usually boosting will happen after the compression. That's kind of my general workflow. But try it. I mean, but like Chris and Tom Lord-Alge, two crazy successful guys, they are really into boosting their EQs before the compressor. That's a big part of their sound, of like everything on 11 all the time sound is from aggressive boosting and then really aggressive compression. But as a general rule, again, how I work, I will generally cut things before compression, and then boosting after to kind of sculpt the sound after that.
Last question. This one's for me. How do you like the LA3A or LA3?
I've always liked it. I have more experience with LA2s.
Shirelli and I didn't realize this till, I don't know, 6 months ago.
Optical compressors.
I was at Rob's. I've had control rooms that were loaded with both, and I love the LA2's tubes. It sounds great. Everybody knows it. To get a real one costs a lot of money. There are even some good knockoffs that aren't cheap. But the LA3, I had some of those in my control room in Florida.
They're a little bit more aggressive, which can be great to get a vocal.
I just used them on everything. I mean, they were my go-to, and they sounded so good. And I mentioned to Rob, and he goes, "Oh, it's my favorite. I wish I could get an SSL to have one on every channel." And I was astonished because people used to laugh at me for using them. I loved it.
But we can throw this out as a last tip. Compression is this thing that I still feel like, decades into this, I've almost got it. I almost have it figured out. But also compression is really one of the things that separates a lot of, productions that come off feeling somewhat amateur and things that somewhat pro. But he was talking about an LA3 and there's also the LA2 or the LA2A. Lots of companies have done different knockoffs of that.
Oh, and in the box too.
Yeah, in the box.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And but the cool thing about that is you pretty much have a knob that's like, how much compression do you want to do?
Yeah.
Do you want to turn it up or turn it down when you're done? And the amazing thing is they sound so good on so many sources. So compression can be intimidating for somebody just getting into this, and they might not do it, which is unfortunate. But they're called opto or electro-optical style compressors, which are your LA2As or LA3s and a few others.
Yeah. 1176,
which is not an opto.
Oh, it's not.
No, that's a FET. Sorry.
Oh,
sorry, I didn't
mean
that.
Not that FET with two G's.
Yeah, exactly.
But field effect transistor. I remember that much.
Yes.
You're kidding. I don't think I ever knew that.
Yeah. So
wow.
It's basically a little optical sensor.
I was never a fan of 1170. I would use them if
me neither.
That would be my third choice. If I had a 2 and a 3 and an 1176 room, I would use the 1176 last.
Yeah,
I didn't love them.
But if you find a plug-in, not everybody can afford all the hardware, but find some plug-ins that do opto stuff. The ones I use are Brainworks has one called the BX Optos, one I probably use more than the others. But they're great because it allow you to really experiment and do aggressive stuff and things like that with really more or less 2 knobs. Like, how much do you want to do?
And how much do you want to recuperate your gain?
Yeah,
to
exactly.
Bring the level back to
and
where
so,
it should be.
And you want to spend the rest of your engineering life mastering compression and go beyond what those can do.
Yep.
But as a great gateway drug, opto compressors are just fantastic. Great on lead vocals, great on guitars, great on basses. Cool for room mics on drums and things like that. So yeah, if you're just getting into it,
great on acoustics.
Yeah, and don't use presets. Presets on opto compressors. Sorry, I could go off for 10 minutes on how goofy the idea of a preset on opto compressors.
It's like learning EQ. Just sit down and try it on every instrument, and it's got a less and more knob basically and a volume knob, and just turn it and try it on different things. And once you get a grip on that, then start understanding attack and release, because that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
Don't even want to go there. Thank you. Always great to see you.
Yeah, awesome. I love doing this.
I love having you on the show. I could do another hour and a half with you. And thank you guys. I didn't spend much time talking to you today, but it was good to hang out with you.
Yeah, didn't do as many questions as we like, but I just ran my trap too much. So. All right.
Your 808 trap. And frankly, I think I had something on deck for next week, but I can't remember what the heck it is.
We're doing musician's gift guide.
Oh, next week is musician's gift guide for the holidays. So bring your pad and pencil. And I want you guys, I want to hear what you guys like. So go into the comments section below this video, the one we're working on right now, and drop some comments in there about what your favorite piece of gear is, and then we'll research it and get a link, and we're going to provide that stuff in the next week's show because we're getting in the holiday spirit.
Swirly gig drink holders.
Swirly gig drink holders?
Yes. They're drink holders that mount on a mic stand. They're awesome. And they're like $10. They're like the best musician gift.
Gotta remember that. He is probably checking out right now. With that, we bid you adieu. A fond farewell.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much.
And a bye-bye. See you next week. Don't forget, post your comments down below.